Thank you very much, Paula. It's a real pleasure to be with you again and see so many nice faces. Tonight we're going to look at the golden section and the roots of theosophy. We're going to look at my path towards finding the golden section, sometimes called the golden ratio, golden mean, and what is really the divine proportion. But also how the golden section played a crucial role in the founding of the Theosophical Society. Following, in fact, a lecture by George Henry Felt on September 7th, 1875 at H.P. Blavatsky's apartment, and then the subsequent search for and recovery of Felt's so-called rediscovery of the Egyptian Kabbalah and the Greek canon of proportion, which is a geometric arithmetic system, as he called it, of proportion, derived from nature, linked to the ratios and proportions of the 5 Platonic regular solids. The intrigue of the purported loss of Felt's manuscript in the Boston fire, and how Claude Bragdon played a very important role, along with an artist by the name of Viola de Guici. What Felt rediscovered was a universal canon of proportion that is the alchemical key to nature itself. It is present in the sacred geometry of people like Schwaller de Lubitsch, Keith Critchlow, John Michel, the editor of my book, The Golden Section, Nature's Greatest Secret, and all of the wooden books, John Martineau and Lance Harding. We'll be looking particularly at some of Lance Harding's work. I'd like to begin with a short video, Nature by Numbers by Cristobal Villa, in which you'll get a good idea, if you're not familiar with the Fibonacci numbers, golden rectangles and spirals, and I want you to keep an eye out for nature's winding number of 137.5 degrees. Now, typically when I start a lecture, I'll have a yardstick, but I'll just tell you very quickly. If you golden cut a 36-inch yardstick, you cut it at 13 3/4 inches and 22 1/4 inches. Or alternatively, think 13.75 inches and 22.25 inches. And of course, we know that a circle is 360 degrees, so if you multiply those by 10, you'll find that 360 is to 222.5 in degrees in a golden ratio, as 222.5 is to 137.5. And that is the winding number of nature, and you'll see in my lecture tonight how that works. So if we could watch the Nature by Numbers, Cristobal Villa. Basically times the golden ratio. This is the golden rectangles that are being formed. And then the golden logarithmic spirals of nature. out to be the winding number of nature and physics, all departments of life. Pentagons give rise to life and consciousness. So you can see why I like that film, and it introduces the subject quite well. Now, as they're setting up the PowerPoint, I must tell you that I break all the rules of PowerPoint presentations. I use many more slides than anybody recommends, and I go so fast it looks like a movie. So just please be aware that that's what we're doing. So the golden section and the roots of theosophy, of course, here we see William Blake's, typically we call it the Ancient of Days, with a pair of compasses, technically the name for that. And again, it's a great honor to be here with you at the Theosophical Society. I would like to dedicate this to K.H. Kutumi Lal Singh, one of the powers behind the initiation of the beginnings of the Theosophical Society, who studied at Oxford in the 1850s, was a student of Fechner in Germany, and purportedly in previous lives was Pythagoras, the wisdom of a Pythagoras, and St. Francis of Assisi, the compassion of a St. Francis. You have the perfect example of the expression of the second ray of love wisdom. And of course, I've put him in a golden rectangle, as many of the artists have figured out how to do. This is yours truly over here, my brother Ted, my sister Kathy, who's, I think, watching. Nancy wasn't on the scene yet. And Ted was a very powerful, willful individual who had a tremendous impact on me. He was a very famous bodybuilder, and he led me into the same field as a youngster, and then I stuck with it. And Douglas Baker in England was really the person that I learned ancient wisdom from. So I was kind of brought up with Rudolf Steiner and Alice Bailey, but my favorite really was Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. And he basically introduced me to her. And from her, I discovered that it's really Plato is the world's interpreter, as she says, and that the ideas of both Pythagoras and Plato are identical with that of theosophy. And furthermore, in the inner group teachings, we find her referring to Pythagoras and Plato and Euclid as initiates. Euclid learned his geometry in the mysteries. Modern men of science only rediscover the old truths. Actually, we've kind of lost sight of what Euclid was up to in the 13th. Basically, the elements are you go from point, line, plane to solid, and then in the 13th book, you compare the ratios and proportions of the 5 Platonic solids. And that's where we'll see root 2, root 3, and the golden mean tonight. But as Madame Blavatsky pointed out, one must keep in mind the penalty of revealing the mystery doctrines, which was death. There was the Sodalian oath that was taken in both the Eleusinian mysteries and others. And though we do give out to the world as much as is lawful, even in our doctrines, more than one important detail is withheld, which those who study the esoteric philosophy and are pledged to silence are alone entitled to know. So my path has really been a search for the sacred number. And of course, here from the School of Athens by Raphael in the Vatican Museum, we find Plato, hand up in the air, Aristotle, hand downwards, and really the Hermetic maxim, as above, so below, and as below, so above. In 1975, as a student at the University of Minnesota, one of my first works was Platonic Aesthetics. It was my summa cum laude thesis there at the university. And I took it very seriously. And in the same year, I was writing on Plato's occult doctrine, his inner esoteric teachings regarding ontology, what exists, and his epistemology, how we come to know things. And one of the things for Plato we must realize is that he could not openly reveal the inner secrets because he would have been punished. But he does reveal them for those who know how to look at his works and abduct it. In other words, retroduct or infer it. I kept up with the training, as you can see, and later I realized, in fact, when I was a University of Minnesota student, I was there primarily to train, but then later, when I underwent deep shamanic experiences in the jungles of the rainforest in Peru, the shamans got a hold of my picture and they took my face and they created an image that, as you can see, what was going on there. Okay, in the Timaeus, Plato begins the Timaeus with the statement 1, 2, 3, but where is the fourth, my dear Timaeus? Now, one of the people that was there present the previous day is gone. So yes, there's a literal, fundamental meaning, so to speak, but there's a deeper meaning as well. And so what Plato does is he shows us two triangles, one where you bisect a square, the face of a cube, which is earth, and you get the root 2. Then he bisects the equilateral triangle, which makes up the tetrahedron, which is fire, the octahedron air, and the icosahedron water. He says this is the most beautiful of all the triangles, or of the two, but then he hints, and see, that's how you have to figure out when you're reading someone like Plato, that there's a deeper hidden meaning. And in the academy, to his members of the academy, there's an oral doctrine called agrapha dogmata, in which he would give out the deeper truths, but you have to figure them out in his works. So as he says, these then we assume to be the original elements